We are live. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for joining our Connecting Culture 2020 presentation on effective digital engagement. It's a real pleasure to be here, and it's really great to see such an interest in the UK creative businesses within our experience sector. So joining me today are my colleagues Anne Fletcher, Director of Interpretation, and Louise Wainwright, who's our Senior Producer. Together as a team, us three, I think we've worked for over 10 years together on creating lots of fantastic on-site experiences and storytelling, and basically creating effective digital engagement solutions. So hopefully this will be very relevant. We've got lots of stuff to share with you. So just to kind of, those of you who haven't heard of ATS before, I'll just give you a very brief overview, really. So we've got over 20 years experience in the sector. We're managing about 25,000 devices out in the field. So we're an audio and multimedia guide company predominantly. And that's delivering about 1 million experiences every year to individual visitors. So we're pretty good at getting to visitors with some great content for our clients. We're a busy team and quite a broad range of skills where we create multimedia tools and audio guides predominantly. But a lot of those are accessible in multiple languages. Obviously, we're dealing with a lot of international famous sites who have a broad international audience. So part of what we create is accessible tours. As well for disabilities, those are blind, hard of hearing, and deaf. We have a unique film and digital team as well. And we also offer lots of consultancy at early stages of projects, which I know Anne will talk a bit more about. But that's really important as at the outset of projects. Usually at the idea stage, we like to try and get involved, talking with designers and clients on what their actual vision is and how we can help them. So a broad range of services that we provide, and we're delighted over the last 20 years to build up some of the fantastic range of clients, from small regional museums who have 20 audio guides through to internationally renowned castles and palaces. Who need something like 7,000 devices that we manage. So we've got a lot of experience here, and I'm going to kick off with Anne, who's going to kind of explain the early stages of how do we create effective digital engagement. So over to you, Anne.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Anne Fletcher, and I am the Director of Interpretation at ATS. The reason we have a Director of Interpretation is that our approach to multimedia is that we start with storytelling. We start with interpretation. We don't believe that tech should be used for tech's sake. We only think we should use it when it improves the visitor experience. So what we're very used to doing is working with clients and with designers from the outset and working out what the interpretation of the site should be and how tech can best serve that. So we run, I think as Spencer mentioned, we run a consultancy service where we often begin, and that's where I come in, we often begin with clients and say, what do you want tech for? What do you want it to do for you? And we try and help people to understand what tech can do. And we also help them to understand that sometimes tech needs to drop back and design will come in, or human beings will come in. So that's a whole range of services that we look at together. And what we're trying to do all the time is come up with new ways of using tech to tell stories. So some of what we'll do today is show you some new things we've developed, some new ways of storytelling, just to get you excited about that. So what I wanted to do is show you some examples. Here's some of the content and why we chose to do what we did with our clients. So the first thing, really good storytelling only works if people know how to find the stories and they know where they're going. So the very first point for us is always to work out how to move people around a site. And I was going to show you an example from St Paul's Cathedral, which is one of our long-term clients. This applies to any complicated building, heritage site, museum. It's difficult to find your way around. So what we often do is divide the building into zones. You can see here we've done, and then we translate that on screen, in this case on a multimedia guide, into something we hope is very intuitive. So you can see on the left, different types of tour that you can choose from. And then on the right, when you get into the zones, each zone has material that you can unlock. Very intuitive, very easy to use, we hope. So we're adopting that across many of our sites, but with their own bespoke design. The other thing that tech can do really well is help visitors to understand what's been lost. And some of the places we work, and this is quite a good example, this is one of the colleges at Oxford University. Some of our sites have got a 1,000-year history, and it's very difficult for visitors to understand. So here you can see these buildings don't exist. The church does, the other buildings don't. It's a way of saying this site evolved in this way and helping people to very quickly understand, I hope, the buildings that are left and what they were there for. So we've done a lot of this sort of recreating, working with curators to make sure that they are accurate. The next example I wanted to show you is in Scotland. This is at Holyrood, next to Holyrood, the Palace of Holyrood House. This is Holyrood Abbey. This is how it looks now. But this has a massively important royal history. Royal weddings took here, royal coronations, royal burials. So to help visitors to understand what has been lost, we created a 3D model, and we'll show you that now. And visitors access this on their handheld guide. And as you move around it, you can see these are the stalls where the Lords of Scotland would have sat. This is the setting for these fantastic coronations that happened back in the 15th and early 16th century. So that's a really good device. Another thing I want to show you is a very, very simple device that we developed. And I'm going to show you an example. This is Windsor Castle. And this is St. George's Chapel, which you might recognise actually from a recent royal photo shoot. But this was the scene of a devastating fire in the 90s. And we were able to tell this story by using what we call a rub-away, which is where you superimpose two pictures on top of each other. So this is how the chapel looks now. And visitors can rub away on their screen to reveal that's how this spot looked immediately after the fire. So that's where you're standing. So that rub-away has been incredibly useful as a means of showing people on the spot, this is how it's changed. Behind the scenes, obviously, there's lots of things people can't see, rooms, objects. And what we've done is developed a number of techniques for helping with that. This is a royal carriage at the Royal Mews, and you can see a very simple 360 sweep through. Allows you to do that, to see it very easily, and to see we've done it with objects where you can rotate objects. Another example I wanted to show you was Highclere Castle, which I'm sure you'll recognise because it has a TV role all of its own. This is an example of really high quality footage that we've used to create a virtual tour of Highclere, mainly for international visitors who can't get there. There's a huge demand, particularly in America. And what this allows people to do is at home to sit and tour these rooms with very, very high quality imagery. So that's allowing access to something you wouldn't normally get a chance to see. Then we developed a way of allowing people to hear from experts. So these are the people who look after objects, who live in the rooms. On the left here, this is a curator from the Royal Collection who's talking about an item from Queen Mary's doll's house. That's an item you would never see this close up, and she can actually talk about how it's looked after and how it's presented. And the other clip I'm going to show you, this is Lady Carnarvon, who lives in Highclere, and everything she is showing, she owns and looks after and loves, and she's telling the family stories behind it. So that's another way of getting behind history and objects by hearing from the people who love them and care for them. So we do a lot of that in our multimedia, chance to meet these experts. The other thing we realise is that sometimes tech is just the best way to tell a story. And I want to show you a couple of examples of that. So the first one is from Canterbury Cathedral. And the story here is that glass from a destroyed window was reused. And you'll see that this is quite a dramatic way of showing that. And this production was first projected outside with a live singer accompanying it with music, with the cathedral in the background. So very stunning, but it's now accessible online for visitors to watch. And you'll see in a moment the window exploding and then reforming into a new window. So it's a very powerful way of telling that story. There we are, just waiting for the window to form. And then I'm going to show you the Old Naval College at Greenwich. And this is an interesting project because we were asked to create a multimedia guide, which you can see here, which allows visitors to see close up the most beautiful painted ceiling, one of the best in the country, and to unlock the stories, which they wouldn't be able to do really in any other way. You can see here, you can pick details, you can hear from experts. And that led to the company asking us to create a 360 virtual experience, which people could access from home. And you're seeing an example of that here. So, and this has been a useful way. It's a bit of a taster to try and encourage people to come to the site and see it for themselves. And during the lockdown, it's been incredibly useful because it's allowed people to explore this wonderful site and explore this wonderful ceiling from the safety of their own home. So we're seeing more and more of this demand for virtual access with really wonderful imagery. And you'll see in a minute, I hope, a really beautiful sweep through of the space. You can see here the power of this sort of virtual recreation. I'm just going to wait so I don't want you to miss this. There we go. So the other audience that we have more and more demand for is the family audience. Very important in every site that we work at. And what we do with family tours is we create bespoke content, very often character-led. And you'll see here, this is the dragon from Windsor Castle. You'll see in a moment the phoenix from St. Paul's. We do very simple interactives and games and fun activities for kids. And these are all accessible on site. I'll just leave you to look at those. So what I hope we've shown you, what we wanted to try and show you is the range of the sort of content that we're able to produce and our power to tell really good stories using appropriate tech. And what we want to do now is introduce you to Louise to really talk about the process and how our very collaborative approach works. So I'll hand you over to Louise.
Thanks, Anne. Hi, everyone. I'm Louise. I'm one of ATS's senior producers. So effectively, I'm the project manager. I'm making sure that the project is delivered on schedule and on budget, but also overseeing the whole process and being the main point of contact for the client all the way through. So we'll talk about our team briefly to begin with. So as Spencer said at the beginning, a lot of us have been working together for a really long time. So we're a very cohesive and close team. We're made up of multi-skilled and highly experienced creative professionals. So in-house, we've got producers, software developers, we've got our film and audio team in-house and all the editing team in-house, which is actually quite unusual. And it means that we can be really flexible, but it also means that we can be consistent. So all those examples Anne's just shown you, you know that if you worked with us, you would have the same team working on your project that worked on all of those. We then have a wider pool of trusted creatives that we can call on, specialist writers, 2D and 3D animators, graphic designers, sound designers, drone operators, translators, voiceovers, presenters and actors. So just a really broad skill set that we can call on to produce our projects. So imagine you've commissioned us to work with you. The first thing that would happen is you'd be appointed a dedicated producer who would be your main point of contact throughout the project. So it's going to be me or one of the other producers you probably would have met up in the lead up to the project anyway. And then we would set up a creative kickoff meeting with our production and writing team and your team. And that's a really crucial part of the project where we sit down and discuss, you know, what are your challenges? What are the stories that you want to tell to your visitors? And what's the best way we can tell them? Do we want to use audio? Do we want to use video? Do we want to film your experts behind the scenes? What voices might you like to use? Have you got any resources that we should use? Archive footage, audio, anything like that. And of course, you know, the crucial things like milestones, kickoff dates, delivery, and all that sort of thing. So we go away from that meeting with a really, you know, thorough understanding of what we need to do. As Anne said, the whole process from that point on is very much collaborative. So we have multiple stages throughout the project where you can review and feedback on our proposed approach. So by the time the script's approved, before we move on with production, we all know that we're on the right track and we haven't gone off-piste anywhere. When it comes to production, I could talk about the process all day, but we haven't got that much time, so I'm going to touch on a few things. Casting is really crucial to get the right tone of voice for you. It's also really fun. It's my favourite part of the project. So, you know, making sure we get the right voice, making sure we get the right presenter or actor. So we would give you access to our bank of voiceovers so you can listen to and choose the voice that you want. If we were filming a presenter or actors, we usually screen test to script, and then again you're able to choose who you think is best. We also, as with the script, we would give you sight of our progress all the way through, so we're doing staged approvals with the content all the way through, so that you're very much, you've got a real creative input into the process. And whenever possible, we can facilitate user testing as well on site of any draft content, so that what we're all working on, we're making sure that it's actually going to work for your visitors and also for your staff as well. When it comes to producing foreign language versions, authenticity and accuracy is really crucial. So we always use native speaker translators and proofers. Obviously, the voiceovers are all mother tongue voiceovers. And again, you would be able to listen to and select the voices that you wanted to use. As a sort of extra measure of quality assurance, we also put a native speaker producer in the studio with the voiceover. So, there should never be any major errors in the translation process. Inclusiveness is a massive passion of ours. We want to give all of your visitors the best possible experience. So for deaf and hard of hearing visitors, we regularly produce British Sign Language tours and subtitled tours. We've also started working in ASL, American Sign Language as well. And we produce audio described tours for blind and partially sighted visitors, where we provide specialist consultancy and script writing services, as well as obviously overseeing the recording process as well. It's not terribly exciting to talk about schedule and budgets, but I will very briefly talk to you a bit about that. Crucial part of my project, of course, of my job is to make sure that we do deliver on schedule and on budget. So we would agree with you a project schedule at the outset, and then we're reviewing that all the way through to make sure that we stay on schedule. Typically, a simple audio guide project will take about 3 months, and a full multimedia guide tour with multiple languages could take around a year. We'll build in contingency if we possibly can, and we'll always try and make sure that you have as much time as possible to review each stage of the process, so we're not rushing you when you feel like you're very much involved. Something that we're finding is happening more and more, particularly with the really big sites and ecclesiastical sites, is we're asked to work with other stakeholders. So we might be asked to liaise with exhibition designers and other creative agencies to make sure that what we're producing fits with what all the other agencies are producing, so that it's a cohesive whole project. That's something that we're really comfortable doing, very used to doing. We've just been doing that with Canterbury Cathedral at the moment, actually. When it comes to budgets, we'd agree a payment schedule with you at the same time as the project schedule itself, and then each payment stage is in line with the deliverable. So you know that there's not going to be any surprise invoices, in advance when we're going to invoice you and how much for. So that's sort of very briefly whistle-stop tour of how we might, produce an audio tour or a multimedia tour. You might feel that neither of those solutions is the right one for you. So, of course, outside of those, we do work on other solutions as well. You can see some examples listed here. Virtual tours, which you've seen a little bit of, websites and microsites, and other digital solutions. It's just about finding the right fit for you and your visitors.
Yeah, I think, and we were chatting about consultancy. That was really useful, Lou, I wanted to give people a picture of how these things are actually produced and controlled. We showed them kind of some of the great examples, but the innovations here, this kind of comes to our overall thinking really in the foundations of that storytelling, but the visitor experience. And I think with the virtual tours, for example, we did the painted tool that we showed you a demo of. And I think the success in that is the fact that we looked at it as a visitor experience. It's not just we knew you could do a virtual tour in 360. The idea is that, well, how can you make that as engaging as an on-site experience, or what are the objectives of the client? And I think and if you want to talk about the consultancy side of the things, that we really want to understand the brief thoroughly before we even start to say.
Absolutely, yeah. And sometimes we say, actually, I don't think you should be doing that. You should be doing something different. So we're not frightened of, saying if we think somebody's on the wrong track. But I think what we're trying to do all the time is think about the story, and then what is the best way to tell the story, and not be led by the tech. So although we're experimenting here with all sorts of new ways of telling stories, we'd only recommend them if it was right for that particular client. And Charles, you've asked a question about virtual tours, and we took all the sound off everything to show you this because we're talking over it. But yeah, there is sound. There is You can, the extracts of the music, there are experts talking to you, there is narration, there's all of that. And that's all designed at the start in terms of what are we trying to communicate here.
And that's been a big success. And the feedback we've had from visitors to the site is it keeps you there. The idea of that project for the client was it's an off-site experience that we want to get to people. This was pre-COVID as well, actually, but the timing of the launch was just on the cusp of lockdown, so they had a lot of traffic going there. But I think the success of that over just a 360 tour that you can walk through a space, much the same as a physical visit. If there's nothing there capturing your imagination or making you stop and look and listen and watch, but I'd really encourage you to go do a search for virtual tour painted hall. And please have a go. We introduced binaural 3D sound, so wear a pair of stereo headphones. There's snippets of audio throughout the whole site, as well as the transcripts as well. But just talking about those future innovations again, this is the core of why we like to have those conversations early. Is finding, this is about what's the most effective digital engagement. Well, we need to work with you to understand what works and what doesn't, coming from operations, coming from budget points of view, but then also just thinking about the visitor touch points. How are they going to access this? How easy is it? And what do you want them to do at the end of it? So really effective engagement is really looking at all these types of solutions and how they best fit to meet your objectives, which kind of brings us on to, predominantly some of the examples we've shown you are mostly multimedia guide or audio guide solutions. That's the majority of what we do, but we've got growing other areas that we just touched upon. But within that, we often have this conversation, and it's come about even more so with COVID, is with the power of a smartphone and apps, surely it's a viable alternative to an on-site device. And we've been having those conversations for many years, and pre-COVID, just on the cusp, it was still the same. It was talking about, why don't we do it as an app and not an on-site device? Well, what comes down to there is the big question of reach. And it's about understanding that we're just about to invest, the clients investing money in some really fantastic content and a lot of time in working out the stories and everything. But then you need that content that you've invested in to actually reach your audiences and have an impact. So this, how effective is it of reaching your audiences? And at the moment, when over the last few years, we create apps as well, and often it's an alternative alongside the multimedia guide. So a lot of our sites have a free app download version of the multimedia or audio tour that is also on site. And the behaviors and barriers to visitors using mobiles are still relevant. So it could be battery life, concerns about that, data, forgotten our headphones. You've come as a family, so not all four of you have got a smartphone to be able to download the app. It's improving, but Wi-Fi access to actually get to the app, to get to the app store, to download, to install. These are all frictions within the visitor journey in an audio tour style app. And so really you've got to look at how that's reaching the audience. Is that the most effective engagement? So here's a diagram of kind of just to give you a bit of an overview of, the download of stores. We're seeing up to 5% downloads on the equivalent app of a multimedia guide or an audio guide. And funny enough, I did a talk last year and a heritage audience, I asked 160 people who downloaded a heritage app in the last 3 months, and the audience, it was reflective of that 5% take up, really, let alone those who actually paid for an app was even lower. So there's a cost issue there, that people aren't actually paying for digital tools such as downloadable apps. So the reach is going to be small on an app. But when you look at a model, if you had guides on site, handsets on site, if you are a free to enter, or you are or you're paid to enter, but then you also have a paid guide, you'll see a take up of between 5 and 15% broadly. So again, on that model, that you need to look at, is that reaching the majority of our audience? Through to many of our other clients where they put it as an all-inclusive offer. All inclusive means usually people have paid to get into somewhere, and as part of that offer, they get given a handset. And obviously that means you are reaching the majority of your audience with this one device that's given out to people to use. So really what we found, effective engagement for us turns out to be really great content on a handheld device still that gets to the majority of your audiences, because if that's what your objective is to reach the majority, you're going to get far better feedback and better visitor experiences. We see it all over TripAdvisor, how people kind of rate the story. And it also says, when you're designing for one solution, so whether it's a multimedia guide or whether it's a website or whether it's a kiosk in site, if you're designing for one solution, you can really nail that down, and you're not having to pay for developing across platforms or across operating systems and devices. So there is a convenience around that as well. So, we're predominantly our vision is that there's still going to be a market for hardware devices on sites. It's probably going to be a blend. We're still not seeing a huge take up of apps still, even during COVID. During this time, we've been working very closely with clients to work on their plans for reopening. And one of the big concerns was people won't want to use physical devices on sites because of hygiene reasons. So we put in lots of things such as cleaning and operational procedures. We work very close to clients, so signage, very clear to visitors on how best to encourage people to still use them. Despite we've got limited capacity of visitors, the take up of on-site devices has remained the same as pre-COVID. So that was eye-opening, really, as to, the behavior of the visitor is still, I'm more happy to take a device as long as I've been seen it's being cleaned and it's used. That is part of my visitor experience. So that was interesting to see. It was a very interesting stat to see. So we still believe there's devices on site for the future for on-site engagement at a lot of sites, which means we've invested in devices like this. This is our focus. It's our flagship product. We designed it from scratch. And basically, yes, fantastic battery life. It offers interactivity, high definition audio, touchscreen. But it's been designed for day-to-day use, so rubber bumpers and just more enterprise-based charging solutions. So the device has been really successful, and it's a great piece of kit that can hold so many tools on there, family tools, languages, loads of memory. But basically, a very easy to use but modern device. There's a lot more requests from clients as well for flexibility of updating and managing their devices. So we've developed a whole system around this one device. It's not just about the device. It's looking at the cloud CMS, so a content management system that we call Workspace, where you can update and manage your devices with content remotely. So you log in and you manage your tours and content online, and you can then push that to your devices through our smart racks and smart devices, whether it's a multimedia guide, an audio guide, and also our CMS can be used for publishing to apps as well. So if you have any updates, you can push them to the apps as well. So it's also collecting data and analytics from the devices back to the cloud. So again, you can report on those. And you get live device health status. So long-term operations, once all the content's been done, you really need to have devices that are reliable and ready to go into every visitor's hand. Like I said, you can update devices, apps, and web apps along with the whole system. So that's where we've been investing in that, and that's where the next set of products are being driven from. Really, is still on site, but with a blend of bring your own device solutions as well. So after we've done all the wonderful content that Louise and Anne have been working on, there is inevitably the post-delivery and its operations. So once you've done all the creative processes, we're into operations. And that's still really a major part of effective engagement, is making sure those devices are up to date and running. So, and that it is cohesive in the whole visitor experience. So staff are trained and they understand how visitors will be using the devices, picking them up, making that really efficient, and logistics as well. I did mention, during this period of COVID, we've worked really closely with our clients on all of them to help put in measures, signage, cleaning, changing routing on the devices for one-ways, for putting key messages on the device as well, just to affirm the safety measures that we've put in place. So there's been plenty around that as well. So we operate and maintain a couple of sites, which I mentioned early on. So we've got hands-on experience of operations. So either we can run a site for a client, or whilst we're working with a client on a pre-project, we can be putting all the procedures and staffing requirements and operations in place to make sure that it's a seamless service. Devices need looking after, charging racks and headphones and the devices themselves. So support and maintenance is very key as well. So we provide full service and support. Like I said, we're doing a lot more stuff remotely, so we can see what's wrong with the device earlier. But then it could just be a battery change or a set of headphones or something like that. So support and maintenance is a big part of the operations, and pushing those contents and those reports, we can manage that as well. Business models, like I said, we work with small regional museums up to national, international attractions. And so there's a whole range of business models and financial models to make that. It could be a capital purchase from a funder, so a one-off purchase with a support package. You can also have a fixed lease arrangement on the devices, or you can have what we call a per capita. So a percentage of ticket price would fall into the payment structure that way. But we're really flexible and able to look at every client and see what works for them.